Welcome, financial detectives. Today, we're opening up a brand new case file on a stock with the ticker MASK. We've got just 5 minutes on the clock to sift through the data, uncover the clues, and crack the code of its technical signals. So grab your magnifying glass, let's get to work. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with the basics of the case file, what MASK even is. Then, we'll head straight to the crime scene for a snapshot of the price. From there, we'll follow the trail of clues in the trend, dig into the deeper evidence of momentum, and finally, deliver the analyst's verdict. You ready? Let's dive in. All right, first things first. Any good investigation starts with knowing your subject. So who or, what exactly is MASK?
Okay, so our subject is 3E Network Technology Group Limited, and they trade on the NASDAQ under that ticker MASK. They're in the network technology and communication services business. That's our person of interest.
Now let's get our boots on the ground and head to the scene of the crime. For any stock analysis, that means starting with the single most fundamental piece of evidence, its price.
On December 30th, 2025, MASK was trading at just over 26 cents. This right here, this is our smoking gun. It's the central piece of evidence that, hopefully, will lead us to the truth. Let's see what it tells us.
And boom, right away, our first big break in the case. The current price is about 26 cents, but look at that volume-weighted average price. It's over 50 cents. That is a huge gap, and it's basically screaming that there's some serious downward pressure going on here. It tells us that most of the recent trading happened at much higher prices. Okay, but an isolated price point doesn't tell the whole story, right? It's like finding a single footprint. We need to see which direction things have been moving. We need to find the trend.
And our go-to tool for this is the moving average. Just think of it as a way to filter out all the day-to-day noise and static. It lets the underlying signal, the real trend, show itself much more clearly. It really helps us see the forest for the trees.
So, this is where the plot really thickens. On one hand, we've got some good news. In the very short term, the price has actually popped above its 5- and 10-day averages. But then there's the cautionary tale. It's still stuck below the longer 20-day average. This is a classic case of conflicting evidence.
All right, things are getting messy. It's time to bring in the forensics team. We're going to dig deeper into the stock's personality, its volatility and the strength behind its moves, what we call momentum.
First up is one of my favorite forensic tools, Bollinger Bands. The best way to think about them is that they measure a stock's mood swings. When the bands are stretched wide apart, the stock is super volatile, making big moves. When they're tight and narrow, things are pretty calm. So what's the report on MASK? Well, the bands are wide, which confirms this stock is making some pretty wild moves. But more importantly, the price is just kind of hanging out in the lower half of that band. So not only is it volatile, it's volatile on the weaker side. Next, let's look at the MACD. This is a classic tool for figuring out a trend's momentum. It basically asks, does this trend have legs? Is it a runaway train, or is it about to run out of steam? Let's find out. And there it is, a key piece of evidence. The reading is negative 0.061. This is a totally unambiguous signal from the lab. It tells us that the downward momentum has some real force behind it. All right, another classic tool in the detective's kit, the RSI, or Relative Strength Index. This helps us get a feel for the market's mood. Is the stock getting too expensive, what we call overbought? Or is it getting too cheap, or oversold?
Okay, so the RSI for MASK clocks in at 41.21. Now, technically that's neutral, but it is definitely knocking on the door of oversold territory. This is our first real clue that the sellers might be getting just a little bit tired.
For our final piece of forensic evidence, we're bringing in the stochastic oscillator. You can just think of it as a second opinion. It also checks for overbought or oversold conditions, just from a slightly different angle, which gives us a more complete picture.
Whoa! Okay, and this is where we get a major twist in the case. The stochastic reading is just 6.36. I mean, that is deep in oversold territory. This is our strongest piece of counter evidence so far, a really powerful signal that the bears might have just overplayed their hand. Okay, let's just pause for a second and take a breath. We have strong negative momentum from the MACD, but we have a powerful oversold signal from the stochastic. We've got a mixed short-term trend. I mean, the evidence is pointing in completely different directions. So what is the final call?
It's time. Time to step back, assemble all these conflicting clues on our evidence board, and deliver the final verdict on MASK stock based on this technical report.
And here it is, all laid out. The moving averages, that's a wash, totally neutral. The Bollinger Bands and MACD are flashing bright red. Those are clear, negative signals. But then you've got the stochastic, our star witness for the bulls, screaming oversold. And the RSI, that's our undecided juror, leaning a little positive but not ready to commit.
So, when the analysts crunch all these numbers, what do they come up with? A technical score of 5 out of 10. I mean, it doesn't get more perfectly middle of the road than that. The verdict is officially neutral, because the evidence is just way too mixed to make a confident call one way or the other.
And that leads us to the single most important piece of advice in this entire report. The bottom line for any detective or trader looking at this case is this: wait for confirmation. Don't jump the gun. Don't act on these conflicting clues. Wait for the market to finally show its hand.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. If you're watching a deeply oversold stock, just like this one, what's that one confirming signal? Maybe it's a price move, maybe it's a change in one of these indicators that would finally convince you that the bounce is for real. Something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.